Welcome to the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. This talk show is presented each week by host Alina Lewis and features guests from our Caribbean islands right here on this channel. As we discuss family finances, proverbial principles, child guidance, and academics at home, guests join in weekly to have conversations that give helpful tips about how to be a better parent. Like, subscribe, follow, and share as you tune in each week for new episodes of the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. Hi, good evening, and welcome to the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. Through this platform, we have conversations that give helpful tips about how to be a better parent each day. And today we're pleased to have Trishana Sergio Arjun in studio with us to discuss how we can overcome overspending. Many of us start each month with the intention to create and stick to a budget. However, far too often it is the repeated experience that we end up not sticking to the budget at all, but rather we make a lot of unplanned purchases. In the end, we're disappointed and in an uncomfortable situation, juggling and struggling to keep our finances under control. Today's discussion is meant to shed light on spending habits so that we can be equipped with strategies to overcome the habit of overspending. So joining us now is Trishana Sergio Arjun. Trishana, thank you for joining us this evening. How are you?
Hi, Alina. I am great, and as always, it's a pleasure.
Awesome. And of course, as you know, today we're talking about overcoming overspending. And for a lot of people, it's a challenge. And even when we think about this COVID recovery world, it's even
Mm-hmm.
more of a challenge because not only it's about only overspending, but even being able to manage spending, being able to manage expenses. And I know we had the absolute pleasure of chatting with you a couple of weeks ago about how to create and stick to a budget. But now we want to delve deeper, of course, because we want to get into the habits of spending. Now that we understand how to create the budget, but sometimes it's hard to stick to it. So even as
Right.
we get into overcoming overspending and that discussion, um, let's start at the beginning. How would persons know whether or not they're overspending? And of course, the reason for the question is a lot of times we create the budget, and as the only thing we know is that we're having a challenge sticking to the budget. And
Right.
sometimes we could say, I wonder if it's because I don't have enough income, but you taught us a couple weeks ago it's not about not having enough income, but it's about what you do with your income. So now we want to take it a step further, and I'm happy to have you on this evening to help us understand how do we determine if we're overspending or if our spending is appropriate. How do we figure this out
Yeah.
so that we can get thinking right?
Right. And it's good that we chose to talk about overspending because it follows directly from our discussion a few weeks ago
Right.
about budgeting. And so, how do persons know whether or not we're overspending? Well, you figure that out as a direct result of having worked your budget. So hopefully by now, people would have had an opportunity to figure out a budget, sit down and understand their spending, and in doing that, they would have figured out whether or not they're overspending in certain areas. And you figure out if you're overspending, if you end up with a deficit budget at the end of the month. It means that you are spending, and we talked about this last day, it means that you're spending more than you're earning. And there are only a couple of things that you could do if this is happening. If this is happening, it means that you are not earning as much as, well, it means that you're not earning as much as you are spending. But there are only two things that you could do about it. You can either increase your income, which is, probably a long term plan, or you can reduce your spending. And so, Alina, that's what The main thing to look out for, if every month you're ending up with you spending more than your income, then of course, but you start with the budget. The budget is the point at which you have to start.
But the interesting thing, Shoshana, a lot of times I think there's a conflict in the minds of many persons, because when we think about overspending, I think it's possible the average person doesn't necessarily think in terms of a deficit budget, but we're
Mm-hmm.
thinking um, spending on needs versus spending on things you don't have to spend for. So, is it what you're
Right.
trying to encourage us to understand is that regardless of the reason for the spend, the point is if you're spending more than you have, that is overspending. Is that what you want us to take
Well, it
away?
means that we need to make cutbacks in certain areas because we can't afford, and it means that we then depending on things like credit, which in long term is not going to be a sustainable thing for anyone because it means that you're going to just be building, building, building on debt. And so you want to make sure that no matter what your income is, that you want to work within it. It might mean that long term you're working on a plan to increase your income. It might mean that you're working on improving your education, or you plan to move to a different job, or you're taking a second job. But overall, it means that if you're spending more than you're earning, then you are overspending. It might also mean, Alina, even if you are within your budget and you are finding that certain areas you're spending a lot of money on. So, for example, this week I met with a client and we were going over her insurance needs and her current coverage and so on. And we realized that she got her life insurance policies pretty late in life. And so she was overspending on her policies because she got not the right type of policy for her age. And so she was paying about $600 more than she should be at this age to get the same amount of coverage that she could get on a different plan. So sometimes it might mean that we think we're doing the right thing and we are investing in the right thing, and she's seeking her family's best interest. But at the same time, she was spending $600 extra than she needed to in this scenario. So sometimes we're within our budget, but we could still be overspending in certain areas.
So, if we were to try to get a bit more practical, then, Shoshana,
Mhm.
what measures, if it is, let's say, our audience looking on, is with their pens and their paper ready to make that list of things
Right.
to remember, what are the measures that you would encourage persons to be mindful of to know that they could put these things in place to prevent overspending? So, I guess we're looking at that broad perspective now on the different things that we can do, either as you briefly kind of hinted at, whether it's increasing income or reducing expenditure. So we're not operating in a place of overspending or spending more than we have.
Hmm. So, I mean, if it is your intention then is to increase your income over time, then that's a medium to more perhaps if planned correctly, it could happen quickly. But it's a plan that you need to either actively seek out jobs or work a second job or plan for your increasing of your qualifications, etc., so that you can apply for other things and improve how much you earn on a month. So that's one way, but that's usually it means it will take some planning and there will be a lot of things out of your control because the job market is particularly challenging during this COVID pandemic that we're living through. So that part of it takes a little bit more planning, and I think is perhaps a little bit more difficult for us to actively work on and see results within a few months. But on the other side, if it is you're planning your budget and you're looking at each category and you're sitting down and you're paying attention to your spending, then that's an easier way to cut back. So last day we talked about grocery spending, and we shared some material where with regard to ministry or the consumer affairs sharing their lists with us regarding different groceries. So that's things like that. So being particularly cognizant of where your money is going. And I know sometimes we don't want to put it down on paper because it kind of holds us responsible for the numbers that we put there. But having it down on paper, I think, Alina, is the first and most crucial step. And I think I said this a lot last day as well. But really writing down what it is a really it's a powerful move. And if you don't do anything else, writing down the numbers on what you spend on different things will bring a reality to what exactly you're spending.
Okay, so of course, at this point in the conversation, we've identified how we would know whether or not we're overspending. And the response is if what you're giving out is more than your income, you're overspending. Whether it is on a necessity or a desire, it's overspending, regardless of the reason
Right.
behind it. And we've also talking now about measures to be put in place to prevent overspending. You're reminding us then to look at shopping and shopping locally. Is it that? And you're saying
Mm-hmm.
to write it down. But one of the things you mentioned, Trishana, has to do with categories of spending. I think few persons probably think about their spending in terms of categories. Could you
Mm-hmm.
maybe shed a bit more light on that to help
Right.
persons to identify different categories of spending so that it would help them to focus on maybe things that should be priority versus things that we need for everyday living versus things that can be deferred, or any other version of it you would like to mention?
So last time, I think our discussion talked about our needs and our wants. So things that we need to survive. So we need to pay rent or pay a mortgage. We need to buy groceries. We need to have clothing. We need to send our kids to school. And then we come to our wants. So we want to have new things. We want to have nice things in our home. We perhaps want to buy um, some luxurious items at the grocery. So those are our wants. And then of course we go into the luxury items like vacations and so on. So those that could kind of be a category of how you break down um, your different spending areas. So your needs and your wants. I focus on the needs first. There's a financial rule of thumb that says 50, 30, 20. So 50% of your income you spend on your needs. So your rent and your grocery bills and what other bills you may have. 20% goes to savings and 30% goes towards those other items that you would like to. So perhaps additional investments or vacations or luxury items that you might want. So usually people in the past, and people still use that sort of rule of thumb, Melina, 50% on your needs, 30% on those luxury, your vacation or whatever the case might be, and then 20% on its savings and investments.
That is, I like that. I think that is something definitely that the viewing audience could write down, that 50, 30, 20
Yeah,
concept,
yeah.
because then, regardless of whether you consider yourself to have a little or a
Mm-hmm.
lot, if we use that principle, it means that once we cut out our 20% for savings, it helps us to always make sure we're putting something away,
Yes.
50% on our needs, and then it gives
Mm-hmm.
us some wiggle room because maybe we might be in a position where our needs don't use up the 50%. Then we have
Mm-hmm.
the option to transfer some of that 50 to things that we desire or
Mm-hmm.
increase savings and investments. I think that's a really
That's right.
great practical tool that we could
Yeah.
have there. And then, of course, I wanted to prompt you, Trishana. I know the 50, 30, 20 was a good one, but are there any other practical habits that you would be able to share that would help persons to understand how they could minimize overspending? Just general things, whether they could do as adults, they could do as a family, they could do with their children to encourage that habit. What are some practical things we can do to minimize overspending?
One of the things this comes to mind quickly because it was my experience over the last week or so. Sitting down with your advisor and going over your current investments is key, I think, and is one of a practical tip that everybody could do. Um, in the coming weeks, because it means that you are reviewing your different spending in different, so your different investment areas, and it might mean that you can have better rewards at the end by moving around things. So it might mean that you don't need to put more money in there. It might mean, so for example, my client who was spending over $2,000 on her life insurance, we could have broken that down for the same amount of coverage for $1,400. And that means that she was reducing and minimizing overspending in that particular category without um, without taking more money from the other areas to put into there. And therefore, she now has $600 that's open up to investment that she can, benefit from in the long term. I think, Alina, that's one of the most practical ways. Other ways could be the same things we mentioned last day. Groceries is one of the. I keep bringing that up because it's one of the biggest areas of spending for families, and so often we can make small cutbacks in that area. I know we have to get groceries; it's a necessity, but it's one of the areas we can be really smart in.
One of the things I wanted to ask you, Shoshana, is
Mm-hmm.
it possible, or are you aware of whether there are any facilities being offered, whether through maybe our financial institutions or otherwise, that persons can tap into to maybe get deferrals or support in one way or another to help ease financial strain during this COVID recovery time?
Well, I know for sure financial institutions were doing their part with regard to premiums and mortgages and loans and so on. So banks, I think, had deferred loans for 3 months. Some of them gave you the option to go up to 6 months. So depending on which institution you were with, you have that option to go for up to 6 months. I think most banks give you that the first 3 months automatically, and then for the next 3 months. You could opt into. Insurance companies as well had premium, you know, uh, with Guardian Life, they made arrangements for our clients' policies to not lapse. Usually, after a certain number of grace days, your policy will lapse, and they had extended this. So, of course, if you have policies with Guardian Life, you can talk to your agent about what is available to you because it might mean that you can't afford to pay a premium this month, and so because you want to allocate that money to doing other things, or because your income may have been cut, or because you're working on a smaller income because your hours have been cut, or one family member is now unemployed. So it might mean that you could talk to your agent and find out what is available to you and your policies, because different policies, depending on the age of the policy, might have different rules to it. And I'm sure the other insurance companies, as far as I'm aware, they've also offered this service, Alina.
Okay, totally. So we have our Q&A session as we usually do, but
Mm-hmm.
before we get into that, we want to take a minute to have a word in from our production sponsor, SRC Private Primary.
Hi, this is Albert Munasar, parent of Sarah Munasar. SRC has been good for us in the sense that she has come a long way because of the personalized attention that they were able to give to us. She has been able to get the attention that she needs to be able to catch up. Sarah initially was a bit behind, and now we think she is well on her way to being able to be a functional student at her level and even be able to surpass what she needs to be because of the attention that she was able to get at SRC. Thank you very much for the time, and thank you for giving the dedication that she needs to become a better student.
Yeah, so now we're getting into our Q&A, and of course we're jumping into a comment first and foremost, where we have one point being made. Sometimes we choose foreign products rather than local, and in doing so we can save. Can you shed any light, Shoshana, to show whether it does make a difference, whether we're looking at the grocery store or otherwise, whether it makes a difference between whether we choose foreign products versus local products?
Well, I mean, the cost of it will ultimately help us to decide. Sometimes we get caught up on brands when a new brand or a less popular brand will do the same job. So store brands, we do have a lot of them locally, but oftentimes the store brand or the regular brand, the brand that makes everything, they tend to be cheaper than the brands that focus on a few items, and they seem as more luxurious and higher end brands, but the quality of the product is oftentimes the same. And so and I'm thinking about grocery stores when I'm saying this, but sometimes it might mean that we just not choose those luxury type brands, because the store brands just give us the same quality they will provide for our family in the same nutritious way.
Right. And just to be really specific, when you talk about store brands, it's likened onto, let's say, going into Massey stores and buying the Massey lentil peas as opposed to an imported lentil peas. That is the sort of comparison you're
Yeah,
making here
also
in terms
like
of, for
PriceSmart will
those who may
have
not,
its
sorry,
yeah,
go
so like PriceSmart will have a members select brand that
right.
may seem inferior because it's a store brand, um,
Mm-hmm.
but really and truly the product is of equal value or equal quality to one of the
Yeah.
higher end brands that they will carry to do the same type of job.
Right. I just wanted to make sure. So maybe if anyone is listening and they were not familiar with the term
Right,
store
right.
brand, that they
Yeah,
would know we're talking about. If you go into Massey, you see Massey
yeah,
lentil peas. So if you go
that's right.
into JTA, you might see JTA has its own liquid detergent. Or
That's
if you
right.
go to
Yeah,
Price Smart, as you were giving that example, so you're talking about stores that have their own brand that tend
that's
to be
right.
cheaper than, let's say, imported. And we could consistently over time save a couple dollars that way. Thank you,
That's right.
Trishana. Another question asks us, it says, no matter how I try to cut back on my expenditure, I tend to overspend because of important things that must be done. How do I overcome that?
Hmm. I think the only real way to start to talk about cutting back your needs in terms of cutting back your expenditure when you're talking about needs, because she's not talking about, or he's not talking about um, splurging on any item, talking about things that you need to get done. Sit down with your advisor, sit down, send me an email or give me a call and sit down and let's work it through. Because it might mean that because you are used to seeing the numbers, everything seems like you're doing the best. But having a fresh pair of eyes could possibly help in, determining maybe we could move around something. So have a discussion with an advisor who could perhaps provide some feedback with particular items on your list. I mean, I keep going back to the example because it's so glaring. But my client earlier this week, she thought that that was the best situation she could be in. She was doing her insurance, and it turns out she could have been saving a couple $100 for the last 3 years each month.
Right. And for those of us who are looking, you would hear Trishana talking about the notion of sitting with your advisor. And I just want to remind those of you who are looking on that Trishana is a financial advisor. So you don't have to go looking far. And I'm sure before she leaves, she'll share her contact information with you
Sure.
guys. But Trishana is great. She's able to sit with you, look at your needs, and be able to give you great advice on how you can achieve your goals and different products or services that would take you in that direction. So just wanted to plug that in there because certainly, Trishana, you've not mentioned it. So I want to make sure the audience
I
knows
tend to not
you are a
advertise.
great financial advisor and, really awesome to work with. So, yeah.
Thanks,
So, yeah,
Andrea.
sitting with a financial advisor is a great way, especially when we're struggling to cut back on expenditure for things that are not splurge items, but are items that are necessary. And we have one
Yeah.
final question for the evening, Trishana, that says, I used my income tax returns to pay my home insurance. Are there any other such forms of income that can be used to make other payments?
Hmm. Your income tax returns, I'm assuming um, from having overpaid your income tax over time, perhaps.
Possibly.
So there is if it says you are investing in a retirement plan, the government mandates that if you are investing in a registered retirement plan with an insurance company, then you get back 25% of whatever your investment is when you file your income taxes. So if it says you want to plan for your retirement, as everybody should be doing, um, you have this opportunity where you can now get back a lump sum every year when you file income taxes. So again, you get back 25% of whatever you put in, up to a gap, um, up to a limit of 50,000 for each year.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you're saying that that is another form of income, similar form of income that can be used
that's
to make
right.
other payments. Totally understood. So, Shoshana, even as we close off this segment, what final thoughts would you like to share with our viewing audience with regards to um, overcoming the experience of overspending? That when they leave tonight, tomorrow, these are the three things that they definitely should consider, keep in mind, and give action to.
Right. So the first thing I want to continue to encourage everyone to do is write down your spending. Write down everything, because sometimes we have a budget and we are thinking, well, I'm looking at this and it's working and the numbers are working out fine, but at the end of the month, I still need more money than I see on paper. And it could be that we're missing the little things. So we miss the extra stop to fill up for gasoline in our cars, or we miss the stop at the grocery store, we miss the extra fees we paid at school that month. So write down everything. Just the first month or two, write down everything. So you capture all the numbers. So I think sometimes we just miss those little things, and it's the ones, and it adds up, and it's what throws off our budget sometimes because we're missing key points. So that's one thing, Alina, I think is key for us to do. The next thing is get a fresh pair of eyes. So call your advisor. I keep saying call your advisor, but feel free to message or send me an email or call me and have a discussion about it, because having a fresh pair of eyes, look at it and really consider different options that you may not have thought of, or you just want to say, okay, well, this is the best I can do, and now it might mean that I need to increase my income because I'm doing really well with my budget. So it might mean that you just have that discussion and work it out and share ideas back and forth. So talk to your advisor. I think those are the two key things I want to leave with you. One of the third thing I want to say perhaps is involve your children early. I know we oftentimes put off involving them in financial decisions because it seems burdensome. But involving them early means that they'll make smart decisions as they grow older. And it means that their financial planning will be better than yours. And so perhaps they will not have any of these, budgeting struggles that we tend to have, because we're not taught often these things. That we were not taught this at school when we were in secondary or primary school. And so I think involving your children and the planning earlier helps to foster good habits, and overall will lead to them making better decisions for the spending of their money.
Okay, thank you, Trishana. And so this was you, but you said get in touch with you, Trishana, but you didn't
Yes,
tell
but
us
how?
how they could get in touch
Right.
with you.
So you can email my email. I think I'll probably post it because it's kind of long, but it's my full name, trishana.sergio-arjun at myguardiangroup.com, or send me a message or WhatsApp me at 326-5412. And I'm always open to questions or a discussion about your budget or whatever else you might want to know about insurance, or planning your finances for the future.
Great. So, Shoshana, thank you once again for joining us. And mummies, daddies, aunties, uncles, we thank you for taking time to tune in this evening for another episode of the Caribbean Parenting Digital Show. Now, as a bi weekly show, it is streamed digitally each Wednesday and Sunday right here on this channel. So, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. We appreciate that you've tuned in for the episode, and we trust that based on the discussion that we've just had with Shoshana, that you are now better equipped as a parent to support your children and by extension, your family unit. So I'm Alina Lewis, and until next time, take care.